Mark,
What's up?
good to see you, man.
It's good to be back.
I mean, it's kind of good to see you. Your book kind of fucked me up, man.
Did it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, that's kind of everything's fucked.
That's why.
So-
Yeah, it was right.
That's the whole point.
I came in all pessimistic, thinking like, nah. But man, I have to say, first of all, you're one of the best writers that I've read in this genre, fucking period. So let's just get
Thank
that
you.
out there.
Thank
and
you.
I think the book is fucking brilliant.
Thank
and
you.
there's some areas I don't agree with, and some areas maybe that I'm resisting
Sure,
agreeing with.
sure.
But fuck, it's good, man.
Thank
it's
you.
really, really good. And I'd love for you to kind of just take people through, and then we'll kind of mix it up. And I'm sure we'll inevitably get into some of the areas where we have some different
Sure.
viewpoints and things like that. But fuck, it's good.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Exactly. I would like endeavor to like lead,
Yeah.
but I don't trust myself to actually do that any justice at all because it covers so much.
It's funny because as soon as I finished it, I remember looking over like one of the revisions, and I was like, man, podcasters. Like, I feel sorry for you guys. Like, I don't even know. I was like, how is anybody going to interview me over this book?
Because you could literally interview over every chapter.
Yeah.
Like, this could be like a 12-part Time Life series of like Aubrey and Mark discuss the universe, and we're sitting on a porch somewhere in South Dakota, like fucking looking at the stars. Like, it could be that.
We should do that. Next,
we should do
by
that.
the way. No, it's funny because you know how like a lot of, like, you don't do this, but like a lot of podcasters, they kind of do the chapter by chapter, give us the bullet points type thing. And the interviews where people have tried to do that with this book, we get like halfway through chapter 3 and they're like, oh, it's time for you to go.
Yeah, right?
So all right, let me do my best to summarize this or give people a sense of what the hell they're getting into.
Uncomfortable truth. It's got to start there, right?
It starts with the uncomfortable truth, which is that any way you kind of logically look at it, on a cosmic scale, everything we know about the universe, how big the universe is, how long it's been around, and how fragile and just tiny our lives are, it's hard to, when you zoom out to a perspective that wide, it's hard to really argue that anything we do has any importance on an objective level whatsoever.
Right.
And this is a thought that I think everybody has, and sometimes we get kind of stuck in it for a while, and that's called depression. But it's nobody really wants to talk about it because it feels awful, it's uncomfortable, and so we kind of like dive back into the world and get caught up in how much our latte costs and whether we're going to get a raise at work next month or whatever. So I want to write a book. Like, I have a strong feeling that there's a lot of nihilism going on in our culture today. There's something about technology and the modern world in the 21st century that I see people becoming very nihilistic. And I wanted to ultimately write a book that argued against nihilism, against this idea that nothing matters, so fuck it, let's just do whatever feels good. But you can't argue against it unless you start there. And so the book starts there. And it gets dark like very fast.
Yeah. Well, actually to me, it was incredibly illuminating from the start, because it goes with this uncomfortable truth and then our desperate attempts to avoid the uncomfortable truth by utilizing this thing called hope, this idea that we do matter, this idea that something we do is going to be meaningful and it will cause change and it will blah, blah, blah. And you really illustrated how, people latch onto that. And that's the thing that keeps them from these states of depression, which is really hopelessness. Like when I feel depressed, that's a sense of hopelessness.
Absolutely.
And
it's a big misconception as people assume that depression is being sad about something. But really, I mean, often it accompanies sadness sometimes. So maybe something bad happened recently. But ultimately what depression is this sense that nothing matters. Nothing you do or say or get up and work on is going to matter. And so why do it?
Yeah, I've fucking been there.
Yeah,
right?
we all have.
There, where you you just, you give it, you send it, you do your best, and then you just see the world around you, or maybe the close people around you that you've spent the time like pouring your information and heart and love and all of this stuff into, and nothing is any different. And you just look around like, what the fuck am I even doing? Why am I trying? Or it's yourself. Or you've been in this self-growth path, this transformation path, and using resistance as assistance. I'm fucking Marcus Aurelius. I'm taking all this and growing stronger. And then I fall back in the same fucking trap that I've been in a million times before, and the landscape looks the same. And I'm like, what the fuck? Have I not even done anything? Have I just been jerking off of my champagne bottle, like you said in the book, and just fucking sipping it just to pretend that I was doing something useful? You know, and then I get depressed.
You like that metaphor.
I love that metaphor.
Jerking off from the champagne bottle. Chapter 6, folks. So yeah, that's kind of, the starting place. One of the things that I describe in the first chapter is that we live in this very strange time right now, which is that by every material measurement, and I'm sure you've seen like Steven Pinker's stuff or Hans Rosling's, like every material measure, the world is better than it's ever been. We're living longer, we're healthier, we're curing diseases, we're wealthier, there's less violence, there's more equality. Like just boom, 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 boom. Everything we have data on shows that we're living in the best time it's ever been to be alive. Meanwhile, on the mental health side of things are getting, depending on your perspective and depending on the research you look at, either worrisome or just like downright horrifying. Everything from depression rates rising across the population, but also at younger ages, to the opioid epidemic that's occurring in the United States and Canada. So everything is so good, yet everybody's fucking miserable.
Well, this is the part where it starts to fuck me up, because like, okay, there's that famous line, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, right?
Yes.
And it's almost like that's always true.
Yes.
Because we always have to, and you talk about this blue dot there, we'll get into it, we always have to have basically this same level of struggle, unhappiness, strife, no matter what the fuck is going on. And if everything's actually good, then we'll make the trivialities the things that actually blow our emotional gaskets and make us, you know, have internal challenges. Whereas if there's hard external things, you know, then those are the things that carry the weight, and the trivial stuff is like we just let that go. But either way, we're finding this stasis point where things are always a little bit fucked.
Yes, exactly. So this is kind of like the first big reveal that happens about halfway through the book, is that, you know, I spend most of the first book going through kind of like the human like how our psychology is constructed and like why we need hope and how hope functions in our mind and in our life. And then you get to the end of the first part of the book, and I make the point that hope essentially needs conflict. Like we need some sort of conflict in our lives to give us a sense of meaning. And the more that you remove conflict from our lives, we either fall into a state of hopelessness or we invent conflicts out of mundane and trivial stuff.
That you had a line, and I wrote it down here. Hope requires something to be broken.
Yeah.
I was like, fuck. Like, yeah, you're right. Like it requires that. Like, okay, so you just do this whole compelling argument about why we need hope. We need to have this belief that something can be better.
Yes.
And we literally need it. You know, from a psychological perspective. But the necessity of having hope is for something to be broken, so we will always find something broken.
Exactly.
So we can have something to fix.
So we feel that our life is meaningful and has purpose.
No, I don't like it.
It doesn't.
I don't like it.
It
Mark.
Doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't feel good at all.
I was talking to. It was funny. I showed a draft to a friend, and he came back and he was like, dude, you were like the Quentin Tarantino of self-help. Like everything I care about, you just like there's just blood splattered all over the wall by the end of the book.
Yeah. It's really fucking interesting. And I think, you know, the only thing, all right, so the thing that I can hang on to and the thing that actually you illustrate is what you're talking about is the aggregate.
Yes.
And within the aggregate are outliers.
Yes.
Like you talk about the monk who self-immolated himself, Kwang Duk. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Yeah,
but Kwang Duk, who immolated himself, literally had gasoline poured on him, lit the match,
yes,
allowed himself to burn in deep stillness and meditation. You have a beautiful piece on meditation too. I love that in there. And that was a photo and an image that changed the world. And then you have Pilecki, who actually signed up for Auschwitz just to spy on Auschwitz, and then got tortured and all these other stuff. And like these outliers who are not the aggregate, right? So like, and there's other spiritual like kind of leaders, like you talk to people who've met Baba Ram Dass, and I met Don Miguel Ruiz, and I watched him look at the sunset each time at a 10, when usually you kind of, from hedonic tolerance, you'll fall to about a 7 on what you think this sunset is. But every fucking time, every day, every hug, everything was at a 10. And same as you would hear from Ram Dass and some of the other people, you see that there's outliers.
Sure.
And I guess maybe I just need the hope that there are outliers and the hope that we could all be outliers. But I have seen some evidence that, okay, in the aggregate, yeah, you're probably right. But we could be an outlier.
Well, so like you said earlier, we need the hope for something. Like hope is kind of like the fuel for our psychological engine. Without it, nothing else runs. So the conclusion I come to is that we just need to become extremely, extremely careful what we hope for, because most things that we hope for will eventually destroy us or destroy somebody else. And so we have to be like exquisitely careful. And I think some of those outliers that you just gave an example, or some of the people that I use as an example in the book, I think the reason they're outliers is because they found something very, very simple. They found a very simple form of hope that managed to kind of like walk that tightrope and not destroy everything around them. And the example of Quang Duc, like one of the things I talk about that I think I would argue that we should hope for is the argument of anti-fragility, which is essentially just getting better at pain. I think that is probably a safe form of hope, of basically reorienting our idea of what a better world looks like as not a world that's removed of pain, but a world where everybody gets to choose their own pain. I think that's a much more accurate reflection of like what a healthy society full of healthy individuals would be. And when you take that form of hope to its logical extreme, you end up with people like Quang Duc or Baba Ram Dass or whoever. It's people who have sat with that internal strife for so long and stared at it for so long that they eventually reach that point where the whole world does come alive, because they realize that they're so aware of that inner conflict in their own psyche that they don't need to project it out into the world around them.
I think that's right. I think that's the point. And I think that's one of the things that I've tried to dedicate my life to. But I think it's one of the things that plagues me is like, fuck, I might not ever get there, because I have hunted pain. With all of the psychedelic experiences, those are deeply challenging, especially the ayahuasca experiences. You're going through death. I'm sliding down vines of thorns naked. I got spiders exploding in my eyes. There's eels eating my liver. Like, it's fucked up. It told me I had cancer. Like, I spent on an iboga journey like 8 hours seeing how I was a manipulative piece of shit. Like I was going to fuck the world up. And then like all of these things, it's like you're hunting these deep challenges, right? So, all right, that's one path. Open relationship. Another path, just massive jealousy and fucking annihilation of my ego in all forms. And the thing that I've noticed in my brain is that I'm conquering these fears and conquering these pains, but my hunger for a different type of pain, my hunger for seems a little bit insatiable.
Sure.
And I wonder, like, man, will I run out of pains that I will hunt to the point where I can like at least move my baseline? Because I do experience great bliss. Yeah. And I actually have experienced more since then, but my hope is that I can get a lot closer to that accessibility to those feelings of ecstasis or like bliss, and minimize some of the pain and maybe raise that baseline like a little bit, but my mind is a fucking gnarly thing. It just keeps hunting for things to worry about.
You just said it right there. And I don't even know if you're aware that you said it. You said that my hope is that I get to those levels of bliss. And you're describing hunting all the pain as a means to the end of achievement, which, as you know, I go over very thoroughly in the book, that anything we hope for needs to be an end in of itself. So it's like right there, you're getting yourself into trouble. You're saying I'm pursuing pain because it's going to make me feel blissful. Yeah. When it's like, no. The pain needs to be the end in of itself. The pain needs to be it.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, that was Kant. Do you have I'm sure you have his quote fresh, but that's one of the most important quotes.
Oh yeah, the formula of humanity. So it's never treat a person merely as a means, but always as an end. And it's very abstract, but it's very simple. So it's like, if I, like, let's say I call you and I'm like, hey, Aubrey, how you doing, man? It's been a long time, blah, 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 blah. And really the only reason I'm calling you is because, like, I want a favor.
Yeah.
I'm, like, pretending to be nice.
Yeah, that's the worst. That's the worst.
It is the worst. It is the worst. So it's the reason that is the worst is because I'm treating you as a means. I'm not treating you as an end. Like, the point is that I'm not calling you for you. I'm calling you for me.
Yeah.
And Kant's point is that pretty much everything bad in life happens because we're treating either other people or ourselves as a means and not as an end. And so treating you as an end would be like, hey, Aubrey, I need a favor. It's like just being honest about it.
There actually is an honesty to a blatant transactional discussion. Like,
absolutely.
Hey, I would like this. I'm going to give you this. What do you think? Is this cool? Rather than like, hey, and like buttering somebody up and like making it illusory.
Well, and this is actually why. So you and I both grew up in Austin. I think we're around the same year. I think I vaguely recall you and I knowing close. Some of the same people in high school. But is one reason why I love the East Coast, man. It's like there's no bullshit. There's no like nobody like, how y'all doing today? Where it's like it's like, no, you want a tip. Like I understand. Here in New York, it's like people don't have time. They're like, what do you want? And if you don't say it, they're like, okay, let me know when you know. Yeah. And there's a certain even though there's a little bit of friction to it, there's like an elegance with that honesty of because you know where you're at with people. Like here, it's like when somebody really likes you, you know that they like you because there's like 80 other people they could be hanging out with, so there's no reason for them to like pretend.
Right. And there's a million good restaurants, so if you're eating somewhere and you eat there a lot, like you really like the food, there's like I fully get that.
Yeah.
All right, I've taken this on a little bit of detour because there was a fucking major point about my own internal flaws that we have to get back to. So
okay.
This idea, and I needed a moment to integrate it. So I wanted you to talk about Kant.
You want to lay on the couch?
Please. I felt like I needed to through some of this, but this is an incredibly important point. The idea that I'm hunting this pain for a result, instead of just hunting the pain because I enjoy the process of that experience.
It's not even about enjoying. It's simply it's just the pain makes you better.
Yeah. So it just is. And that's okay. So you said amor fati, which is love your fate, like love what is, love your reality, like love the process.
Yes.
No matter what the process is, regardless of the ends, like love the process. I mean, I wrote a book about the process and Own the Day on Your Life. It's important. I understand that. But nonetheless, I think projecting to I'm doing this because is a way that you get mind fucked.
Yes.
Rather than I'm doing this. Yep. This is the process.
Because, as the title says, everything is fucked. So even if you achieve, and I think this is what you're running into, you're caught up a little bit in this hamster wheel of like, oh well, maybe if I do this therapeutic work, or if I do this practice, or if I take this psychedelic, like, man, now they'll give me the breakthrough I want. And it's the fact that you're having that thought in the first place that is preventing you from having that breakthrough, if that makes sense. Because it's whatever you go through, whatever pain you go through, whatever growth you go through, things are still going to be fucked on the other end of it. it's just going to be fucked in a slightly better way than they were before. But it's if you keep going through the process expecting them to not be fucked anymore, then you're just fucking yourself twice. So it's what Nietzsche's whole thing that I talk about, the amor fati thing, is just love the fucking-ness. Just love, and I think that's where these spiritual that's where these spiritual teachers end up at that constant 10, is that they're loving the suckage. They're loving the anxiety that comes up. They love it. The discomfort, the fear, the concern that maybe they said the wrong thing to this person or that person. They love it. They've learned how to love those things about themselves.
I had one of my spiritual teachers is a guy named Ted Decker, and he's been talking to me about this similar thing. And, because he's been someone I've been reaching out through the painful elements of this process.
Sure.
And, his wisdom's incredible, but he keeps saying, like, bless the pain.
Yeah.
Like, bless the pain.
Yep.
And I kept saying that. I kept finishing the sentence with bless the pain because it's gonna blah blah blah,
exactly.
but I wasn't just listening to him. He never said bless the pain because.
Yep.
He just said no, bless the pain. Like, bless polarity itself. Bless the ups, bless the downs, bless the jealousy, bless the ecstasy, bless all of it equally.
All of it.
And I was like, because why? And then I fucking but that's it. And that's exactly what you're saying, but from, another philosophical, psychological standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, it's super interesting. One of the things that I explored in this book, like, my background is kind of Buddhism and Eastern philosophy as well, in terms of like my personal practice. But in the last few years, I've become incredibly interested in Western philosophy. And I feel like they're talking about the same thing. Like, everything you're saying right now, the bless the pain, bless this, and like waiting for that because, like, that's Kant's means and ends. Like, you're talking about means and ends. And it's like, just like Kant was like, stop treating things as means, only treat things as ends and of themselves. Like, it's like your teacher's like, bless the pain, just treat it as an ends, Nietzsche was saying the same thing. It's love what is. Stop seeking anything outside of like what is already.
Damn.
It's awesome.
It's awesome.
This shit, like it.
And that was actually because it's true.
Yeah.
Right. It actually feels the very best. Now, there's not that there isn't resistance, because in part of what you said, like, when there's certain parts of your identity that are changing, like, you mourn them.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, there's things that are, and like, there's parts of this, I'm doing this because of this.
Yeah.
Like, the part of that is going to have to die.
Yep.
And I'm going to mourn that. It's just the way that the feeling brain works. It's like, when this thing changes, there may be a mourning process that you go through, but I can start by blessing that mourning process and be like, okay, letting all of this go. But it's a reorientation of the way that the fucking brain works.
I'm glad you bring that up, because it's a subject I feel like is under discussed around, especially in the personal development world of, everybody wants to change themselves. Nobody realizes that there's like a certain sadness that with real change. There's a certain sadness that comes along. Jesus, Ryan.
There's a certain sadness that comes from that fucking ringtone.
Because it's a lot. I think a lot of people get caught up in constantly changing themselves. It's almost like a pursuit. It's like chasing highs.
Right.
It's they want to have that big breakthrough and be like, oh my God, I'm so different, without realizing that there's a come down on the other side of like grieving who you once were. And it's like, even, to give an example for my own life, like I used to party to like an unhealthy degree, and it took a lot of time and focus to kind of get my shit together. And when I did, I was so glad I did. But for a year or two, there was like this kind of sadness and nostalgia that like, oh man, I'm never going to be that guy again. Like, I'm never going to be that guy, like, in a club at 3 a.m. Like, it sounds awful now that as a 35-year-old, it sounds awful. But like, 6-7 years ago, like there was a sadness. It was like, man, I miss being that guy sometimes.
And did you ever, because I find this, like, as I'm letting things go, sometimes I have to prove that I still can.
Yeah, that too.
Like every once in a while, like, look, I'm giving this up, but just so we all know, I still got it. I
still got it.
Like, rack up that pyramid. We're playing big beer pong all night. Let's go. But yeah, because it is hard to let it go. And like, it's like being in that, even letting go of a relationship, it's
Absolutely.
like, oh, let's just have sex one more time. It's like, okay, let's just fucking party and do coke one more time.
One more time.
Just so I can just know it's still there.
It's never the same though.
It's never the same. And you kind of need to know, but some party, it's helpful to know that. You don't need to, because sometimes you can't.
Yeah, sometimes it makes it easier to let go.
Yeah.
Because it's like now I'm at that point in my life where I wouldn't be caught dead in a bar after 10 o'clock. It sounds like punishment now, but I needed to learn that for myself. I needed to hit that point before I was like, okay, like it helped me become more comfortable with my past self and my current self and kind of like the movement through those two things.
When you talk about, there was some really interesting stuff at the first half of the first part of your book about, I think it was Newton's laws of emotions, which people don't really talk about very much. And then the moral gaps that are created and how we try to cure those moral gaps and how we think about what we deserve and dive into that for a second. Because it felt to me like this is what every psychologist, psychiatrist actually should probably be talking about. Like, this is the framework.
Yeah. Well,
but I haven't heard it much.
Well, thank you. Yeah, because I made it up. But that's a huge compliment.
Wait, there are no Newton's laws of emotions?
No, man, he had Newton's laws of emotion.
Oh,
he's a physicist. You know what's so funny, man? Is like I was such a so my editor did the same thing. Like, I wrote the first draft. And
you even said it was in like a dusty part of his library or something. You're like the fucking guy who made the mermaids documentary that I believed. I believed in mermaids after that. And I believed in Newton's laws of emotions. God damn.
I wrote this whole like kind of historical fiction around Newton, and instead of so the part about his life is accurate. Like, he was a fucked up dude, but like the laws of emotion. My editor did the same thing. Like he like sent me an email. He's like, man, I can't believe I didn't learn about these in school, And I was like, dude, I made them up. Like, it's Newton's laws of motion.
Oh, emo Newton.
Now you get it, okay. Emo Newton.
Yeah.
The laws of emotion are analogous to the laws of motion. So like Newton's first law of emotion is an object will stay in motion until another object acts against it. And so I just took that and I said, like, your emotional experience or your identity will persist until a new experience acts against it. One of Newton's laws is for every
action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Yes, equal and opposite reaction. I changed that to be for every action, there's an equal and opposite emotional reaction. So it's just kind of a fun way to like, because it does apply. It really does apply.
It makes a lot of fucking sense. And then how those are applied.
Yeah.
And like the difference, I think you said at one point, like, you get punched in the face and you can either react. There's a couple ways you can react. You can it has to have an action. So that's the action.
Yes.
And then your emotional reaction has to come.
Yeah.
And that emotional reaction is going to come with the equal amount of force. So that could either be punching back.
Yes.
That's one way that it could go. It could be anger that you don't express physically, but you express it internally and you boil in this internal kind of rage or whatever. Or you start to put it internally instead of projecting it externally as anger, but internally as I deserve this.
You decide you deserve it.
You decide that you deserve to be punishment, and you take that and you put it against yourself. And it's like, fuck.
And it's proportional too.
Right.
I mean, it's like, if I just slap you a little bit, you'll be like, dude, what the fuck?
Yeah, exactly.
But like, if I like full out wind up,
I
mean, we're gonna have problems, So it's, and this is just a fundamental component of our psychological makeup, is that we for every experience of pain, like a negative experience is an experience of pain, or a positive experience, which is the alleviation of pain or removal of pain, we feel a need to compensate whatever caused us those things. So if I punch you, you're going to have an overwhelming emotional urge to equalize in some way, whether that's hitting me back or doing something sneaky or whatever. If I like do something overwhelmingly nice to you, if I give you a gift, you're also going to feel an emotional urge to compensate. You're going to hug me and you'll be like, oh my God, dude, you're the best guy in the world. Oh shit. Like it's every kind of emotional impulse that we feel, it is based in this like constant seesawing of
trying to balance out, trying to fucking balance and find that equanimity, find that place of where the scales of justice are balanced, exactly, right? Like where reciprocity is held, but it gets so twisted in the way that we do that, because if you give something more than that person feels that they can return, they have to react to that. Yes. Like they have to react to that in a different way. Well, I can't return that. So, and my gratitude is not enough. Maybe they don't believe that their gratitude is enough, because actually genuine gratitude is typically enough. Yes. But they can't give that because they don't feel like they deserve it and they can't repay it. So then they have to either hypothesize some way to diminish your gift by saying, oh, it was fucked, it was manipulative, it was this, it wasn't really a gift, it was that. Or find like you have to go through all of these different fucking processes to actually, and all of these are happening subconsciously. Yeah. Because it's like a universal law that we're trying to find balance.
Yeah. Well, and it's I think whether it's meditation or therapy or whatever, we become more, I think emotional intelligence is basically just kind of becoming more aware of this process within ourselves. Yeah. Understanding what's triggering us, understanding like why we feel helpless in some situations, why we feel like overwhelming emotions in other situations. But where it really messes us up is when we're kids, because we don't understand two reasons. One, we don't understand what's going on. And two, we are helpless. So it's like if somebody hits you and you're 5,
you can't hit back.
You can't hit back.
No doubt.
And so you just internalize it.
That was a big part of what fucked me up, man. My dad would throw me down in the corner of a room and yell at me. He wouldn't hit me physically. Yeah. But I couldn't muster any kind of way to stand up for myself. I was a 4-year-old kid, 5-year-old kid, 6-year-old kid, right? So I internalized all of this, and it created all of these massive things until finally in a psychedelic ceremony, I showed up in vision back in that as my full grown-ass 205-pound self. Yeah. My dad was probably never more than 180. And I was like, so I was bigger than him and stronger. And I was like, you can't do that to me now, Dad. And I was like yelling at this fucking vision in my head to like correct this initial thing that I was never able to actually correct the inertia of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I was a fucking kid. There's no way I could. I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the tools. I couldn't release it. I couldn't match it until like that particular guided session, which didn't have that as the intent, but that's where it went. That was the only thing that actually allowed me to correct this initial inertia that had been fucking me up.
Yeah, and that's essentially what therapy is in a nutshell. Any sort of therapy. It's digging into those past experiences, finding those emotional experiences that haven't been equalized, and then equalizing them, talking them through in a new way, understanding them as an adult, so that you feel equalized. So you feel like, all right, I'm not a piece of shit. Because dad used to hit me,
because that's really one of the only ways that you can do it is you have to make it feel like you deserved it. Yes. It's like one of the only options you have available. Yep. Or you can hold anger and project all the anger and all the fault or some combination out into the world. There's a couple of reactions you can do, but the options are limited because you can't actually stand up for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Man. Yeah, it's heavy shit.
Okay, so, and then there's another saying, which this reminded me of too, is like, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. I don't know who said that. Shakespeare or some shit?
Probably.
It's Old English. Sounds like it. Sounds like it. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. All right. So a woman scorned, that means that you don't want to be with her, or man scorned, whatever. It doesn't matter. Gender, it's non-gender specific. But
well, back then it would have mattered.
Yeah. So you scorn somebody. So a jilted lover, someone who wants to be your lover, but you don't want to be their lover, right? So that creates this anger.
Yes.
Right. This feeling a feeling of pain that they're feeling. You're causing this pain, even though you're not. Even if you're cool and you're like, yo, I'm just like not feeling it. Like, I love you, but I'm just not feeling it. Well, you're causing pain, and that pain has a reaction, and that reaction has to be is going to be something.
Yeah.
And it's going to come out internally or externally in some way.
Yeah.
And and the hard part is, even if you're being cool and being like, yo, like, I love you, but it's just not really working for me and whatever. But like, if you're causing the pain, there's going to be a reaction.
Yes.
And if that person's not aware and tracking that reaction, who the fuck knows how it's going to come out?
Yeah. Well, and the hardest part too is that the more intimate the relationship, the more sensitive.
Yeah.
So again, it's one thing, like if you walk out, you seem to know something about this.
Yeah.
But it's like if you walk out on the canal street or whatever and some guy like slaps you, you can be like,
fuck that guy.
Yeah, you can be like, oh, fuck that guy. And then 10 seconds later, you'll forget that it happened.
Sure.
But like if your girlfriend slaps you, then it's like
in front of your friends or like something else like that. Or
if your mom slaps you, then it's like shit gets
deep.
Really hurts. Yeah, really, really hurts.
Yeah. And then so that actually, it's like a force magnifier.
Yeah.
When it's someone that's intimate and someone that you have expectations of a certain level of behavior about. And if it carries the label like mom or dad or girlfriend or wife or husband, and it has this magical cloud of expectation around it and like familiarity and all these things, then it's a force magnifier for any little trivial action that might be there, or maybe it's not trivial. Yeah. But then that force magnifier is then going to have an effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what hurts more, like a random person slapping you, or like your girlfriend saying something mean to you?
Fuck, I mean, I'll take a slap any day, right? Like that's easy. And even if it's like online or a random criticism, the only ones that hurt really are the ones that you agree with.
Yes.
Absolutely. Because then it's you hurting yourself by way of them, by way of your agreement of them. Yeah. And you are your own force magnifier.
Oh, that's so true.
For that fucking thing. So and then that really hurts. Wherever someone's like, Aubrey, you're gay. I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, I'm not gay, but like, you can call me gay if you want, and maybe one day I will be gay, and I'll tell the whole world that I love dicks and they're delicious. Like, fine. Like, it's not the thing. But when someone was like, Aubrey, you're not funny, and I was like, oh man, I have all these friends who are comedians and they're funny, and oh man, and I got all like bummed out from this guy being like, Aubrey, you're not funny. And I was like, what? Oh man, I'm not. And then that was the one that fucked me up. Just because I was the force magnifier of that.
That's why I don't read comments anymore.
There's a lot of people.
Like,
fuck a lot of people that do that.
Fuck the comments. They know too
much.
Bless
the comments, Mark. Bless the comments.
Bless the comments. The comments are fucked.
Yeah. I think, that idea that to bless the experience that we're in, and it's like there's one of my favorite lines from a musical song is, I just did a podcast with him too, Mike Posner, is he says that everything is as it is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's this acceptance of the now.
Yes. That
ultimately is the only escape from all of this. Everything is fucked. Like, acceptance of what is, acceptance of the now, a collapse into the present moment, which is like really out of the mind to a certain degree. Like the collapse into the present moment is almost a surrender to consciousness, which is actually putting consciousness, awareness of the self, and us being just simply alive in the highest like vantage point, and having purview over the whole organism, so that the mind, either the thinking or the feeling, isn't in control anymore, and presence is actually in control in the moment. Like, that's really the only way out of the fucking treadmill.
Yeah.
Kinda, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's to give up control rather than trying to control more. It's a giving up of control. It's which is, a lot of people misinterpret that as doing nothing. It's not the same thing. You still do the things that you want to do. It's just you understand that ultimately you don't have full control over the consequences, and it's all about just making the proper decisions, making the proper choices, doing the proper actions. there's a phrase that I really like. I can never remember who said it, but it said like hold strong opinions held lightly. You know, so it's like I like to think of it as like bold actions done
with a smile.
Yeah, done lightly. You know, done understanding that like you're probably gonna fuck up completely, and you're gonna fail a lot, and you're gonna embarrass yourself a lot, but embracing that side of it.
The only time I've really felt like, not the only time, but one of the times where I felt like I had the greatest access to being in truth, like when I feel like I'm in truth, I find everything hilarious.
Yeah.
And sometimes this has been like big psilocybin journeys, like big, like boundary pushing, ego dissolving psilocybin journeys where everything is just so funny. It's so funny how stressed I've been about things. It's so funny how stressed the world gets about things. Yeah. It's so funny. Like I remember in this journey, I was watching my best friend Kyle, and he was fucking with something on his foot, and I was just so funny how concerned he was with this like splinter that he had in his foot, you know? And I was just howling with laughter. And like that was like a moment of clarity for me, which was that like we take these things so seriously and put value propositions on everything: better, worse, good, bad, happy, sad, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Everything is like one side or the other. We're making judgments. We're judging fucking constantly. Yeah. When like really the whole thing is kind of hilarious. So choose a path that allows more good stuff and more fun stuff and more exploration, but do it and understand that the whole thing is ultimately like can collapse in a little bit of hilarity.
Well, that's the flip side of the uncomfortable truth. You know, it's that if we're so insignificant and nothing we do ever matters, then that actually liberates us to love unconditionally. Yeah. To create, to pursue life with joy. Like there's no reason not to.
There's no reason not to.
Just the way there is no reason to do it, there's no reason not to. So you might as well do it.
Yeah, might as well laugh a little bit more. Yeah. Like in the Toltec tradition, you know, Don Miguel Ruiz writes about some of his masters. Yeah. And like one of the things, I think it was Don Ezekiel who he talks about, which is like his great grandpa. And he talked about him just being so mischievous and such a trickster, but all he found everything so funny. Yeah. You know, like people would have these important gatherings and he would do something silly. It was like the, what was it? They called it in Lakota something like the Heyote or whatever. But anyways, he was like just a trickster because he realized that all of these things we take so seriously. Ooh, this is a wedding. Ooh, this is going to be so fucking serious. You know, this is a funeral. So fucking serious, you know, and he was just finding the hilarity in all of these things. And that was one of like Don Miguel's great teachers, is to like see the humor in all of this human drama that we create, this constant need to find some way to create tension, to create struggle, to create adversity, to create enemy, to create opponent, to create all this, and just go like, bah! Look at us go.
That reminds me of like when my grandmother died. This was when I was probably like 10 years old. She had a great sense of humor, and she was like, you know, I don't want people to like be miserable at my funeral. You know, I want people to remember how fun I was and all the good times we had together. So she put in her will that her funeral, like the music at her funeral had to be this like, it was this ridiculous, bright, goofy, like children's musical type music. And I just remember going to her funeral, and it was such like there was so much dissonance because everybody was so sad, and there's just this ridiculous music playing the entire time. Yeah. And I was like 10 or 11. I was like, this is so fucking weird. Like,
yeah, it is really liberating when you get to those points, and you think that you really need to care and really have to have like really believe in it to try, but you don't. Like the trying itself is the ends, right? Like trying hard is part of the fun. Like if you're playing sports, you can play to impress your coach or impress a girl or win the championship, But you know what? Playing fucking hard is awesome. It's the most awesome.
Dude, means and ends.
It's the most awesome to give it your best. Like, that's the best fucking game.
Yeah.
Is when you're really playing your hardest. So if that's really what's the best, is just going for it, then it's not about what the result is.
Yeah, absolutely. Means and ends.
Means and ends. It fucking comes back to that.
Fucking Kant.
He had it.
he just fucking got it.
All right, so we got to talk about AI. Because you have this was the one where I was like, whoa, I did not fucking see this coming. So at the end, you're like, in one of these ways of people worrying and having all this fear and anxiety about what AI is going to do, you're like, nah, bitch, just surrender to it. It's better than us.
Yeah. I find it and let me preface this of like, I'm not an AI scientist. I don't think about these issues 24/7 like a lot of people do. But I've read the same books and listened to the same podcasts probably most people have. And speaking of something that I just laugh at, other people are like, well, human race is gonna be annihilated because AI is gonna produce more efficient toothpicks from our bones. I just find the whole thing hilarious. Yeah. I find it absolutely ridiculous. Eventually we're going to develop machines that outstrip us in terms of intelligence by such a degree that to think that we have any control, and B, would even know what the fuck to do with it if we had it, I just find absurd. Like it's like thinking your dog, it's like training your dog to beat you at chess. Like it's just your dog has no conception of, your dog's understanding of morality ends at good boy, it's, and our understanding of morality is going to be similarly limited in the face of like what AI can comprehend and process.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple issues. One is like, what form will we create these at? Will we create these fucking iRobot Terminator kind of machines that are equipped with it, and then that have a directive that we don't have control? Like, I think people are going to be mad hesitant for that. But as far as like thinking, like there's no doubt that thinking is kind of done. Now, what's interesting then, all right, and chess is ultimately algorithmic with a clear objective. Art, on the other hand, like poetry, art, will AI, but they might. Because they might be able to analyze. They might be able to analyze the art that is loved and then produce that in such a way that it's irresistible.
There is AI produced art. There's AI produced written symphonies now. Some of it's okay. It's still not great. There's AI fan fiction. I think there's one of my end notes I referenced like a Harry Potter book that was written by an AI, and apparently it's not awful. Like it's not good, but it's readable. You can actually read it. There's a story and there's like dialogue and stuff that makes sense. I just feel like when people start worrying about this stuff, I think we're projecting the worst aspects of our own nature onto AI. Yeah. Like, we're the ones who committed genocide. We're the ones who like rape and pillage large populations of people en masse. Like we're the ones who kill each other over frivolous and silly things. So, the idea that AI is going to do that just because we're not like, they don't need us to drive cars anymore, I just find to be absolutely.
I find that absolutely insane too. It's the same argument for aliens. Like, I'm not convinced that there are actual physical aliens or not, but if there are and they can beam here in the fucking speed of light from some distant galaxy that we can't even fucking find, their brain is probably way more evolved and they're probably tapped into AI anyway. So what makes us think that they want to fuck us up? Like, what is this Independence Day fantasy that like they want to hurt us? Like, most likely they're cooler than us. Like, most likely their morality has fucking evolved to a point where they're in equanimity or something. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you watch Fire in the Sky and they're like pulling fucking scrotum and fucking fingernails off, that's pretty ruthless, but who knows if that shit existed.
I think we're projecting on the worst aspect
because that's the shit that we did. Go to the dungeons of the Inquisition, see the fucked up shit that we did to witches, people who didn't believe in that particular form and variety, that flavor of Catholicism of the moment.
I mean, stuff people still do today. Governments still do today. I think of an alien, like a superior alien race came across Earth, it would be like I imagine it'd be like walking into like one of those cat cafes in Japan where it's just like dozens and dozens of kittens like running around and like swatting at each other. You're just like, man, oh,
it's so cute.
It's so cute.
And you just don't disturb it.
Yeah,
like,
you just
don't
let
disturb
them
the
do
cat
their
cafe.
thing.
Like if you go to a natural habitat of animals,
Yeah.
you're a dick if you start slapping animals around and fucking,
Yeah.
it's like, no, leave the habitat. Like leave the habitat Earth and maybe put some boundaries on it. Because now, who the fuck knows? I mean, all this is just real like hypothesis, but I think you're right.
Yeah.
This idea that it's going to be the worst of us is definitely a false idea. But the thing that I don't know is, all right, you talk about Elliot, and I want to go into this. You talk about Elliot. Elliot lost his ability to feel. Mm-hmm. And Elliot was a fucking idiot.
Yes.
He was an idiot
Yeah.
because he couldn't feel. And I think to make art, you have to feel.
Yes.
And now,
but you also have to think.
You also have to think. But AI can mimic the algorithm of feeling. It can mimic the algorithm of consciousness, but can it actually experience it in a way that could produce like feeling that would create good art or good story or achieve consciousness? That's where I become dubious.
Well, it's interesting. So early in the book, just for listeners, I draw a distinction between the thinking brain and the feeling brain. And
brilliantly, by the way. That's fucking awesome, man.
Yeah, thank you. So it's one of the things I talk about actually in the endnotes of the chapter about AI is that, to back up for a second, early in the book, when I'm talking about the two brains, I talk about how essentially what therapy is just getting the two brains to talk to each other, like getting them to communicate seamlessly. Like you understand what your feelings are, and your feelings respond to your thoughts, and back and forth. There's like a nice little conversation going.
And most of the time they're lying to each other, but
but
that's okay.
like when people get fucked up, it's either because they're all thinking brain and they ignore their feelings, or they're all feeling brain and they ignore their thoughts.
Or the feeling comes first, and then the thinking brain comes in to justify those feelings based on any hypothesis. That's how all tyranny is kind of fucking. That's how people get equanimity in themselves. How they find balance is they justify it in some way. Oh, the Jews are an inferior race that are after the certain people. Let's put them in the fucking oven. And they justify it, and it makes sense in their brain because their thinking brain is acting on this feeling of whatever feeling caused them to want to create this genocide. And their thinking brain's like, oh, I'll fucking justify that.
So before we go too far down the Jew Holocaust road, it's one thing that I find interesting is that, so much of what we struggle with in the as individuals in the modern world is understanding like what the fuck our feeling brain is thinking and or what the fuck our feeling brain is feeling and doing. Like that is a lifetime of work to get in touch with your feeling brain, understanding the impulses, why you do things, why you feel things a certain way. So what's fascinating is with AI, like raw calculations, like chess, AI surpassed us decades ago. Mm-hmm. The thing that they're hung up on is essentially how do you construct a feeling brain? And because a feeling brain is surprisingly, it's far more complex than a thinking brain. A feeling brain is drawing like across large neural networks of like thousands or millions of associations of different experiences all simultaneously. And that's actually way, way, way harder to put into a machine than just algorithmic calculation. And so that's a fascinating little like symmetry, I guess. That's the bottleneck in AI right now.
And it may be a bottleneck that is unsurmountable. Yeah.
Period.
It may be the bottleneck. And so for me, I have no religiosity in my body, but I have a deep, deep spirituality. And that comes from largely the plant medicines and, well, I guess animal medicines too, because the strongest psychedelic I've ever done is 5-MeO-DMT. And in that experience, which is like something that the Colorado river toad produces, and it comes in a little, you basically smoke it, you vaporize it, and then you have an experience. And that experience can only be described by me, and it's ineffable. It's completely ineffable, and it can only be described as God or love or source or unicity or singularity or whatever you want to feel. It's all the feelings of all time expressed simultaneously in the complete collapse of who you are and the surrender to being everything at once.
Yeah.
It's like, God is such a messy word, right? Like it's really
a lot
hard,
of baggage.
Really hard to use that word, like deftly, right? But like, and that's why, like when Hamilton Morris, who's a scientist, he did 5-MeO DMT. He crawls to the riverbank, and all he can do is mutter love, love, love. Like, it's an incomprehensible experience. And I think that may be the boundary, and that may be somehow woven into our feeling, and it may be somehow woven into this innate connection to something that machines may not be able to replicate. But I don't know that for sure. But I felt something that seems beyond the algorithmic calculation that I know is coming with it.
Well, it's an age-old philosophical question: is consciousness just a certain arrangement of physical matter, or is there something non-physical going on? Mm-hmm. We have no fucking idea.
Nope. and it really, like, experientially is the only way that I know how. Like, I don't expect anybody to, like, take my word. Like, well, I heard Aubrey talk about 5-MeO DMT, and therefore there's a gut. No, please don't. Like, please don't go rush out and do it either. Like, this isn't saying like everybody needs to do this. This is my path. I've chosen it, willfully, and it's yielded an experience which I could only describe as like, okay, now I can feel God, and I can feel what that feel. I can feel love, like capital L, love, and I felt that, and so I can now have a point of reference, and I don't know exactly how to describe it. Necessarily, but the curious thing is then, is that an essential part of who we are, and is that an irreplaceable part of who we are by whatever form of technology that we're birthing?
I feel like I lean more towards the we're just physical stuff side of things, just from what I've seen in like our understanding of like consciousness in other animals. And the development of the human brain. But what's fascinating is if we are just physical stuff, then the AI at a certain point, I mean, this is what is discussed as like the singularity. AI at a certain point will develop the technology to merge consciousness. Like you could download and upload consciousness from our brains the way, you upload and download MP3 albums. Mm-hmm. You could stream somebody else's consciousness into your brain, and they could stream yours. And it's so this whole identity, this whole thing about ego identity, it just gets obliterated as soon as the technology reaches a certain level. That's a fascinating thing to think about too. It's once we pass this bottleneck, it's everything we actually kind of understand as Buddhist enlightenment. It might just be in the cloud somewhere.
It may be. And I think this is actually interesting that, and you go through this whole, beautiful explanation of what Nietzsche said when he said God is dead, and how AI may be the new God that is replacing this. But there also, and maybe, or it may actually, by its inability to replicate, and the failure to surpass this bottleneck, we might actually, and the legalization and proliferation of these psychedelic technologies, which are interacting with the brain and unlocking. I mean, DMT locks into receptors in the brain, and actually it's like a lock and key. It's like fits in to these things that are there, ready, waiting for a variety of different molecules. But DMT is one of the things that can fit into it and create this experience, right? So there is, some materialist reductionist thing that's actually happening, but the experience itself is radically ineffable. And that so we may actually start to find out answers about like God and consciousness and these things through the process of creating AI and through the technologies that are coming online and our understanding of it.
Absolutely.
Whoa.
It's an exciting time to be alive.
It is.
And when we figure it out, it'll still be fucked.
It'll still be fucked. It'll still be fucked.
Still be fucked. It'll be fucked in ways that we can't even fathom right now.
Because even after having that experience, and like I've made, it forces you, when you have these deep experiences, these deep spiritual experiences, it creates the desire to create changes to line up to accord with this new knowledge and information that you have. But it doesn't mean that things aren't still fucked, and that's very frustrating.
Yeah,
it's very it's like I felt love. Why can't now I know things, but I'm still stuck in the same kind of trap.
It's so I had, it was a long time ago, but I had a psychedelic experience where I had, for probably 30 to 45 minutes, I felt my ego dissolve. I felt that oneness of everything. And it was funny because you mentioned the frustration. Like, it's when you're in that place, because like right now we're sober. And so you're like, yeah, it's just frustrating to think about. But it's like when you're in that place, you're like, yeah, frustration's part of it too. Oh, I love frustration. You know,
you're in the amor fati.
Yeah,
you're in
exactly.
The love of the experience.
So it's it's a bit of a mind fuck.
It is. Man, I can't believe that you created the Newton's laws of emotions, by the way. I'm still like, damn.
Honestly, man, what you said about it was like, and it's funny too, because my, initially, like, my editor hated it. He was like, this is confusing. Nobody's going to follow. And it was much worse written at that time. Like, I had to work on that chapter a lot, like more than any other chapter in the book. And he was like, it's confusing. Everybody's going to think Newton actually did this, you know? And so I mentioned, I think I mentioned in the main text that it's like something about like a hypothetical situation. And then I had in my end notes, I say like, this is fiction. I made this up, blah, blah, blah. But he eventually came around to it, but he was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, everybody's going to go run out and buy like a physics textbook.
Well, I mean, it's really interesting because actually in hearing that, I mean, I already was radically impressed with your understanding of philosophy and psychology. Yeah. And I'm actually even more impressed now because you really made this up. And honestly, like, it's one of the best maps to help understand our mind that I've fucking ever come across, you know? And I'm really like excited for the world to like get access to this map that we can actually start like tracking these stuff with some actual like understanding of what's happening with us.
I really appreciate that those chapters, basically that map, chapters 2 through 4, hardest thing I've ever written in my life. Like,
it shows, man.
I spent as much time on those 3 chapters as the rest of the book combined. It was a beast, but it's something that I could always kind of see in my own head, and I really wanted to get it onto paper and like explain it lucidly. For years, actually, even going back to subtle art, like I had some of these ideas already. But it's, holy shit, my next book will have to be easier.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't, I mean, it's really, it's a great gift for the world that we get to have access to this. But speaking of your next, what is fucking kind of, I mean, obviously this is coming out and like, don't even worry about the next, but like, is there other stuff you're thinking about?
I'm already writing the next one.
God damn, you're savage. You're a savage. I think like you need like years vacation after a book like this.
But the next one's not my own, so I'm writing Will Smith's book.
Nice.
Right now, which is
except it's not actually Will Smith's book. It's actually your book that you're pretending is Will Smith's book. It's Will Smith's book on this. And you're at the foot in the fucking endnotes to make, actually, Will Smith had nothing to do with this. I made this up from his perspective. Enjoy, everybody.
So it's I just started writing like last week. I've been meeting up with him for the last year, so talking about his life. He just turned 50. So
wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. So
he's killing it for 50.
He's having one of those.
That gives me hope. That right there. There it is. We're ending with this silver lining because Will Smith is crushing it for 50.
Dude, he is a monster. It's so inspiring being around him. But like, so yeah, I've been working with him on and off for the last year, and now it's time to like actually hammer through a draft. So Will Smith, his life, his lessons, a lot of crazy shit he's been through that the world doesn't know about. So I'm super excited. And hopefully it'll be easier.
It's gotta be. It's gotta be, man. It's gotta be. Yeah. Well, shit, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate this, brother. This is the third great podcast we've thrown down. So, look forward to continuing this.
Can I pimp my shit? May 14th.
Yep.
And markmanson.net and speaking tour coming to a bunch of major cities. Check it out, markmanson.net/books-tour.
And do you read your own Audible?
I do. I did the audiobook for this one.
Dope. Yep. That's hard work too.
It is. It's surprisingly
hard work.
Exhausting.
Yeah. It is fucking very exhausting. That's awesome. So yeah, and obviously everywhere, this book is going to go everywhere.
I hope so, man.
No, I mean it. I'm pretty fucking confident. Unless people get really offended by the word fuck. But yeah, man, it's I'm looking forward to that. So definitely, I encourage people to check it out.
Appreciate it as
Good shit.
always.
Yeah, man, definitely.
you.
Thanks, everybody. Peace.